I'm so grateful and encouraged to see so many of us here committed to the same agenda. So I am going to take my leave of the podium, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank you again for coming to today's meeting, and most especially thank you, President Brewster, for your partnership and for allowing us the opportunity to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. And it's so good to be partnering with AKA again. It's been about a year since we had a partnership with AKA. And by the way, there are pins over on the membership table that have AKA and UNA. They're UNA, AKA partnership pins. Now, I am delighted to welcome our keynote speaker, Angela Kariuki, who had been working on the issue of the human right to a clean and safe environment when she was still working for UNEP at its headquarters in Kenya. She recently came to the US only about 1 month ago, and so she's taking up the fight as a program officer at the UNEP New York office to support the work of UNEP in the human right to a clean and healthy environment. Angela, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and sorry about that, just needed to set up my computer. So hi everyone and good afternoon. I was really pleased to receive this invitation to speak during the annual meeting of the UN Association of Westchester, so thank you again for having me. The topic of the human right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment is one that's very close to my heart. As Marsha already mentioned, before joining UNEP even, I was working with my national human rights institution back home in South Africa to ensure that this right, which is recognized in South Africa's Bill of Rights, was made a reality for communities directly affected by developments, including mining operations in their areas. I'm also filled with pride to see how the right has developed at the international level. Until 2021, there was no UN body that recognized this right at the intergovernmental level. But all of this changed in October 2021 at the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and then further cemented at the highest decision-making body of the UN, the General Assembly, last July. But how did this recognition happen, and what does this mean for us as individuals? Okay, there are meant to be some slides up. Okay, I'll just continue. So the link between environment and human rights has been recognized as far back as 1972 with the adoption of the Stockholm Declaration. Then 20 years later, the Rio Declaration was adopted on environment and development. Both these declarations show how the links between human rights and environment, as well as dignity, were prominent in the early stages of the UN's efforts to address environmental problems. We can just go to the second. So the international human rights community has recognized consistently that these two fields of law are interrelated. For example, the UN Human Rights Commission, which is now known as the UN Human Rights Council, addressed environmental issues through resolutions on the movement and dumping of toxic and dangerous products and waste since about 1989. And these linkages have also been recognized at the regional level. So in Africa, Article 24 of the African Charter is explicit in that it provides that all peoples shall have the right to a general satisfactory environment favorable to their development. And in Europe, the European Court of Human Rights has on many occasions also determined that environmental degradation can interfere with the enjoyment of protected rights. And then closer to the US, in Latin America and the Caribbean region, in 2019, countries adopted a historical agreement known as the Escazú Agreement, which establishes protections for the rights of access to information, public participation, and access to justice in environmental matters. But it's really at the national level where we see many countries recognizing this right. Next slide, please. So every year since, sorry, I don't think that's, there we go. Every year since 1971, at least one country has written or amended its constitution to include or to strengthen provisions related to environmental protection. And today there are over 100 countries which recognize the right to a healthy environment in their constitutions or in their Bill of Rights. All these countries recognize the major advantages that arise from adopting a constitutional environmental right, because having this right really increases the legitimacy of policies by integrating social and environmental concerns. It also enhances the accountability of governments, the private sector, and environmental or human rights organizations, and it really creates stronger cross-sectoral links, which can further efforts towards sustainable development. And having a constitutional environmental rights is also a recognition or a commitment by countries that to address environmental challenges shouldn't be indifferent to human suffering. Next slide, please. So at UNEP, we did a lot of this analysis to assist us in our work with governments. And this is really what we do as part of the law division of UNEP. It's all about working with governments to strengthen their institutions and to strengthen their laws. So we worked with them to move towards the international recognition of the right. Since I don't have a lot of time, I won't go deep into the analysis, but I think what I've already mentioned just now has already given you a good idea of where we started to get to where we are today. And the objective with this analysis and all the background work was really to demonstrate to member states that a right to a healthy environment is an idea whose time has come. And the road towards the first international recognition at the Human Rights Council that I mentioned in October 2021 really wasn't easy. Many governments were opposed, and some still are, to the idea that such a right even exists. So we had a lot of work to do within the UN system to describe the various elements of the right, as you saw in the video. Eventually, this resolution was adopted at the Council, but the Council is a small membership. It's like 48 member states who are part of it. But it was the first time that we had this type of recognition. And then, as you all know, the General Assembly followed suit in July last year when it adopted a resolution on the human right to a healthy environment. And awareness of this right is also really growing in the US and Canada as well, which is kind of lagging in terms of national level recognition. But it's gaining traction at the subnational level. For example, the state of New York adopted a constitutional right to a healthy environment in November 2021. Next slide, please. So in facing the ever increasing complexities, don't worry, I don't know what happened to it, regarding our planet, people everywhere view the right to a healthy environment as central to addressing challenges of environmental justice and the disproportionate environmental harms that are suffered by already socially, economically, and politically overburdened communities. But what does it mean for us? What does having this right mean on a day-to-day basis? It really means that we have the right to insist that the environment is protected for our benefit and for future generations. But it also means that we have a duty ourselves to do what we can in our own lives and in our communities to protect and to restore the environment. It means that we have the right to ask for environmental information. We have a right to request from our governments information about the air quality in our neighborhood or in our area, or the water quality. We have the right to be informed if a development is taking place, maybe the construction of a massive building or a gas station or even a factory. If it's taking place in our neighborhood, we must be informed. And you must be allowed also to participate in consultations before the development starts. And if you think that a development has been initiated without people being informed or consulted, and if that development contaminates air or water or the natural environment, that could constitute potentially a violation of our rights, and then we would have the right to seek justice. So while we have this right, we also have a duty to do our bit to protect and to restore the environment. But sometimes trying to uphold the right to a healthy environment isn't easy. And you hear of many people standing up for their rights, standing up for the environment, many activists, both young and old, who are protesting the conditions of the environment, who are demanding more ambition, more action from their governments and big businesses on the topic of climate change, for instance. A lot of these individuals and groups identify as environmental rights defenders, and many of them often get threatened, arrested, or even killed for their work and their efforts. And many of them get labeled as anti-development. So UNEP does a lot of work with environmental defenders as well. We have a protection mechanism for the organization so that anyone who's facing harassment or threats for defending their environment, for doing what we tell them to go out there and do, they can then get legal assistance. But we are also working with other organizations who can provide emergency assistance. Sometimes this looks like funding to relocate them from a dangerous area or their community where they might be getting harassed to a safer area. So for UNEP, it's very clear that we need to do more on the issue of the right to a healthy environment, because anyone can become an environmental defender, and many do, and this is due to circumstance rather than by design. So we also need to remember that the UN was created not only to respond to the needs of member states, but also to protect people at the front line of environmental conservation, even when other actors fail to do so. So before I finish, I also wanted to comment very quickly on something that just occurred to me on the train ride over here. And this is, discussing really the nature of the right to a healthy environment. It's one that's considered anthropocentric, which means that it's the right of humans to live in or to enjoy a healthy environment. So it's a bit of a selfish way of looking at it, because it puts humans before the environment. And of course, there have been some criticisms of this approach, but at the same time, there's also the movement on the rights of nature, which is considered an ecocentric or earth-centered approach. And this has grown significantly, where we're seeing rivers, mountains, and other non-human entities being given legal rights of their own. But that's a topic for another day, and maybe we can have a follow-up session where we talk about the rights of nature. So to conclude with a very simple response to the original question, which was the topic of my intervention today, what is the right to a healthy environment? I would say that the pure form of the right to a healthy environment is an ideal situation where humans are healthy because they live in a safe and productive environment, and the environment is healthy because humans, we realize the need to protect it in order to stay alive and in order for future generations to be able to sustain themselves in this environment as well. So thanks very much for your attention, and I look forward to the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Angela, for that fascinating discussion. I was so happy that she looked at so many different aspects of the human right to clean and healthy environment. Thank you, Angela, and I hope everybody will have a chance to talk to Angela after the program is over. I found it fascinating that 100 countries have included the right to a clean and healthy environment in their constitutions. Wow, that's amazing. So thank you very much, Angela. That was fascinating. Is Representative Bowman here? No. It is now my great pleasure to call on the co-chair of our Young Professionals program, and that is Paul Presendiu, who is also the Global Goals Ambassador for Sustainable Development Goal 13, Climate Action. Paul, you have the floor. And by the way, can you put the screen up?
All right, I'll take this down here.
I wanted to start off by asking Paul, I understand he was in Washington during Earth Week at the time that President Biden signed that new executive order. What was that like, Paul?
It was a starstruck experience. I was one of the people that was fortunate to receive an invitation from President Biden to join him in the Rose Garden as he signed the new executive order, establishing the Office of Environmental Justice, making sure environmental justice is part of the core nucleus of federal government agencies. And the day before that, I was actually at the private residence of Vice President Kamala Harris, where she was calling upon environmental justice leaders to bring home locally the conversation that needs to be done. You know, America is a quilt, not a blanket, so it's important that we really tap into the diversity of our communities and see who are the people that are out there and just equipping them with information that could help facilitate environmental dialogue. So I'll invite all of our phenomenal panelists. The first is Vanessa Agudelo, a resident of the city of Peekskill, first generation Colombian American, and also is the youngest ever elected city council person in the city of Peekskill, which she was elected at the age of 25. Vanessa currently is the county organizer for the Westchester Alliance for Sustainable Solution, a countywide coalition of communities looking to bring zero waste technology to our communities to have a better ecological footprint with our solid waste management. Our next speaker we have is the phenomenal Harshal Shet, who is our first vice chairman of the United Nations Association of Westchester County's Young Professional Program, providing programming for residents between the ages of 40 and 18. Harshal is currently a first-year dentistry student at NYU. Our next speaker is Marissa Glaze. Marissa is a resident of Mount Vernon, New York, has been doing phenomenal work in grassroots environmental education. She is the former city of Mount Vernon's Youth of the Year through the Mount Vernon Boys and Girls Club, through her phenomenal work bringing educational resources and recycling and proper waste disposal to the Mount Vernon youth. And last but not least is someone that needs no introduction, Anusha Vaish, who is a resident of the town of Eastchester. Anusha is a 7th grade phenomenal leader for our insect population and overall entomological sciences, study of insects. And she has started her work 4 years ago, if I'm correct, Anusha, and has been providing a wealth of educational resources on letting people know what the insect population, how it impacts our supply chains and agricultural practices, and just making sure that we are looking out for that dimension of our communities. Oh, yes. Sounds good. Okay. So, all right. So the first will go to you, Vanessa, and is what negative impact does our current waste management system in Westchester County have on the public health of our residents?
Thank you so much, Paul. So before I answer that question, I want to ask the audience a question. Does anyone know what happens to your trash after you throw it in the trash can? Oh, I should have told Marcia to keep her hand down. She was ahead of the game. But yes, we actually were doing quite a bit of tabling over Earth Week a couple weekends ago, and we were all over Westchester where we were talking to residents, and we would ask them this question. And a lot of what we would get back is like, oh, it goes into a dump, it goes into a landfill. But what people don't realize is that all of Westchester's trash is being trucked over to Peekskill and then being burned at the trash incinerator known as Wheelbrader, now rebranded to Win Waste. And folks don't realize that burning trash is actually worse than burning coal. It actually emits twice the amount of carbon emissions. It's twice as bad as landfilling as well. It emits twice the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. It's worse than burning coal on about 30 different pollutants. It's actually causing a public health crisis in Peekskill, and it's part of the reason why, or it's a big reason why, as to why we have some of the highest rates of asthma, high rates of people suffering from cardiovascular disease, lung disease, high rates of babies being born with low birth rates, more so than anywhere else in the county. And these are things that are often tied to communities that have trash incinerators in their backyards. So we're really looking to the county to recognize the impacts that this is causing, and really because it's jeopardizing the health, the quality of life of Peekskill residents. And it's not just stopping at the borders of Peekskill, right? Because we know that pollution just doesn't stop at it doesn't recognize municipal borders. And it's also causing a detrimental impact on the quality of life for the county of Westchester. For those of you that don't know, the county has been receiving a failing grade of F by the American Lung Association for a number of years, largely due to this #1 industrial air polluter that is Wheelbrader. So we really need the county, we need their leadership to hire a zero waste consultant, an expert that can come up with a plan to move us towards more sustainable waste practices and off the trash incinerator. And what we do know is that currently the county has a contract with the trash incinerator through the end of 2029. These contracts typically run 10, 15 years. So what we absolutely do not want to see is for the county to renew the contract come 2029 for another 15 years, because this facility is way past its due date. And the practice really, and this is really the main point, is past its due date as well. So we need an expert to come up with a plan to put forth real action steps so that we can make sure that come 2029, we're not in a situation where we're doing this contract and still sending over our waste. But not just that, because I have to make you aware that Wheelbrader isn't just burning Westchester's trash. It's burning trash from Greenwich, Connecticut. It's burning trash from Brooklyn. It's burning trash from surrounding counties like Putnam County, Dutchess County. So we have to recognize that Wheelbrader's bottom line is always going to be profit. So not only do we have to come up with a plan to divert our waste and really expand on our zero waste infrastructure, but we have to put our foot down and say, no longer are we going to burn trash in the county of Westchester. No longer are we going to compromise the health of our residents because we cannot put any cost on that. And our residents deserve better. So that is the work that we're doing. I've brought a petition and some flyers here if anyone wants to find out more information afterwards. I would love to talk to you all about how you can get more involved with our campaign. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, yeah, so thank you so much, Vanessa. The next question will go for Harshal Shet. Harshal, as Vice Chairman of our Young Professionals Program, can you share a project you have led that connects to an international sustainable development goal?
Thank you, Paul. So like we mentioned briefly earlier, the Sustainable Development Goals were adopted by the United Nations, and they're very important because they're an international call to action to try to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that people can have a peaceful life. So it's very important to address these on an international level, but it's also important to try to see what we can do in our own community first. So one of the things that we did through the United Nations Young Professional Chapter during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic was trying to partner with Feeding Westchester, which is an organization that is trying to address the second sustainable development goal of zero hunger. So with this organization, we were able to initiate several collection boxes around the county of Westchester, trying to collect non-perishable food items that will eventually be donated. So over our month-long campaign, I'm glad to say that we were able to collect over 560 pounds of food that was donated to Feeding Westchester, which also contributed to part of the millions of meals that were provided to our residents of Westchester. So having this background of the Sustainable Development Goals also contributes to our right to a healthy environment, because when we have times of crisis, times of need, being able to provide a healthy environment is super important.
Thank you so much, Harshal. Thank you. Our next question is for Marissa Glaze. Marissa, what inspired you to bring grassroots education in recycling and waste management to Mount Vernon youth through the Boys and Girls Club?
Thank you, Paul, for asking that question. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you guys for having me on this panel. I'm very inspired by the fellow youth that I see sitting next to me. And thank you for the United Nations for having me on this panel. I was inspired by the environment, just the earth itself. Like every day I'd wake up, I would see the trees, I'd see the beaches, because I grew up in Jamaica, and I'm like, wow, this place is beautiful. Like I would write poems about it, like the earth literally, it inspires me. So in Jamaica, I grew up in a community where the residents cared about our community. Like if there's dirt on the streets, someone would wake up early in the morning, sweep it up. Like we'd all have our own garbage in our like yards, because we had like huge land spaces, and we would take care of our environment. So when I came to the US and I moved to Mount Vernon, I realized that the residents in that community didn't care as much as what I was raised seeing. So that kind of hurt me. So when I went to the Boys and Girls Club and I joined the teen program, that's when I spoke up to my youth mentor, Miss Sandy Narain, and she brought us all together and she let us speak our mind, like how did we feel about the environment, and I was very passionate about my community. So I would always try to make meetings and get involved with organizations that would care and come into Mount Vernon and teach us about like how the trees were made, how our water was affected. And I worked with an organization where we tested the water samples in Mount Vernon. We brought back the test results to the council, and then they applied for a grant, and we got the grant to clean the water supply in Mount Vernon. So it's just the little efforts that you make, and you see that there's progress being made, regardless of how slow it may be. Just seeing that you can make a change, it's very inspiring. So.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for you, Anusha. I know that our insect population is generally it's overlooked in terms of climate discussions. So can you take a moment to share with us what value do insects bring to a healthy and sustainable environment?
Thank you for asking me this question, Paul. So insects in general, they're usually overlooked and seen as pests. But little do so many people know that only 98% of the insect population, they're actually great contributors. They help the environment in so many ways. Only 2% of the insects are actually considered harmful to the population of humans and other organisms. The other 98%, either they play a role as pollinators or natural cleaners, and they make the insect world very diverse. Little do many people know that insects like bees and butterflies, they populate 90% of all the flowers and 80% of all the crops, and they're needed in the they are also very crucial contributors in the food web. Many insects are the major food sources for lots of birds, such as cicadas. An example of this is that one flock of cicadas, they need over 6,000 caterpillars just to grow. Without these small birds, many other animals such as falcons, sharks, reptiles, they would not be able to survive and thrive. Hence, the food web will be thrown off chart. Many other things, such as leaves and dead animals, whenever you see them on the streets, do you ever notice how after a few days they just simply vanish? This is because many insects, such as flies, they tend to come by and clean them up. However, when you ask somebody about flies, they're often like, ew, like who wants to see these here? Little do they know that our world is so much cleaner because of them. Without the insects, our world would be so much dirtier and we would not be flourishing as a humankind. Hence, this is why insects are major contributors to the idea of a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And since they are on a 41% decline, I have made it my mission to share why they are so helpful to the world. I have my vessel of voice is actually a website called saveinsects.com. And this way, many people across the world, not just there, so people don't have to come to one area. They can view it from across the world, and they can see exactly how insects are needed every day. Thank you for inviting me to this panel, and thank you for being here.
So we have a couple of questions that are prepared by the Young Professionals Program for our panelists. And the first one we have prepared is for you, Vanessa. Many people in the human rights community associate protection of the environment as a primary responsibility of governments, with everyone having the obligation to respect human rights. What can we do as individuals to help ensure that the right to a healthy, clean, and sustainable environment is achieved and protected?
Thank you. Yes, that's such an important question. And I think, excuse me, I think the most important thing that we can do as individuals is really to recognize that we are part of that larger ecosystem, right? And realize that we have a role to play in that larger ecosystem, and that others are playing a role as well, and understanding those power dynamics so that we can function in a way that is beneficial for the collective. And that's really what when we talk about people power, that's what we're talking about, right? And often we talk about people in a very people power in a very abstract way, and that doesn't get broken down into kind of the individual steps that we can do, and what does that look like, being a part of kind of a larger collective movement. And that means being involved with your local government, understanding kind of what's on the agenda, what are the local issues in your local community. The reason why I got inspired to get involved to organize was because I was really inspired by the call to organize, and find people's power from the bottom up. And when you start paying attention to what your local council meetings are talking about on their local agenda, or even what is up for debate on state policy and the legislative agenda, these are all things that we need to be involved with. I know that here in Westchester, not only are we campaigning to end trash incineration, but we also have the dumping radioactive waste in the Hudson River, which we are calling on our state representatives to pass legislation so that we can outlaw that before Holtec is able to dump radioactive tritiated water into the Hudson River. And that's why we need individuals to make those calls, to come together, to come to rallies, to protest, to really activate that people power. That's the responsibility that we have to push our legislators, to push our elected officials, because although it is their job to look out for our environment, to ensure that we have that clean air, clean water, they're not going to do it unless we push them to do it. And that is just the reality of it. So it's going to be up to us to make sure that we're coming to these rooms, that we're coming back, that we're going to our council meetings, that we're making those calls, we're attending our town halls, and we're inspiring our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters to stay involved, because democracy isn't going to work unless we make it work, and it can't happen without us. It's with us that we're going to be able to make this change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you. Our next question that we have is for Harshal. Harshal, what could we as United Nations Association of Westchester do to amplify your work to the out-large international community?
So the United Nations Association of Westchester has always highlighted so many different projects and initiatives over the years, whether it be food collection, education, women's rights, so things like that. So being able to focus on the Sustainable Development Goals is very important in bettering the international community as well as our local community as well. So being able to use this momentum and drive towards the Sustainable Development Goals is important, whether it be through zero hunger or the 6th Sustainable Development Goal, which is clean water, which was mentioned a little bit earlier. So being able to focus on initiatives like this, whether it be youth-driven or whether it be through things that come up in our community, is important in highlighting. And something that we can do is having interactive projects that are led by youth or people who are strong proponents for that particular issue. Seeing them drive the boat, so to say, is important in being able to see progress made on a local level first, which will then contribute to making a difference on the international level.
Thank you. All right. So we have, for our last two panels, we have the same question, because you guys are representing some of the dynamics of our communities. And it is, what barriers, so first I'll have you answer first, Marissa. What barriers do you believe exist preventing fellow young leaders from following in your footsteps in terms of making an impact in your local community?
I feel like there's a disconnection between our community leaders and the youth in my community. I feel like the leaders, they are putting in the work to set up the events, to bring people to Mount Vernon, to show the youth that, you know, you can bring change to your community, because I've taken part in a lot of these organizations that has helped us like bring healthier foods into our community, that's partnered with different organizations to make sure that the youth know that, you know, our community is being damaged. There's stuff that we can do, but because the youth are not, they're just not passionate, or they're just focused on different things, I feel like that's where the problem is, their mentality. Like, they're not looking at the community like, oh, I want to love this community. They're looking at the community like, this is a place I want to run from, because there's so much bad happening in our community, especially since like it's a low income community. There's so much violence happening, and there's times when our community does come together, but it's like, if it's not for like something that terribly happened, like recently someone lost their life in high school, and the Boys and Girls Club, the teen program, and we set up a march to, like, you know, march for her, you know, her terrible incident, and so many young people came out. It was like, it's something you've never seen happen before, but it's like, when you put in the effort to make these things happen, it can. And once the youth care about something, they will come up and they will show out and they will be passionate, they'll take part of it. But it's like, if they don't care about the environment, then they won't show up for it. And that's the concerning part, because it's like, if you don't care now, when are you going to care? Like, what about your kids? What about your family members? What about your grandparents? If you're going to leave this place behind, you might as well leave it in a positive state. So I think the barrier is the teens, the youth mentality.
Thank you so much, Marissa. And our next one for you, Anisha. What barriers do you believe exist preventing fellow young leaders from following your footsteps to make an impact in the local community?
Thank you. And I fully agree with you, Marissa, that I think that people need to be inspired. They need to have a passion for what they do. Like you see so many people come together for things like for sports, as an example. Like me personally in a middle school, I know so many people are passionate about their sports, right? So they go out to all these different sports events and they like to compete there. But as for the environment, I also find that whenever I talk to my friends, for example, they're like, oh yeah, I know climate change is a really big important issue, but they often don't speak about it because of embarrassment. They are embarrassed of what other people will judge of them because of them speaking up. So what I try to do in all of my work, I try to change their mindsets because me personally, like as Mother Teresa said, she has a very famous quote where she said, I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone which will create ripple. Me personally, I want to change their mindsets. That no matter what you say, nobody will judge you because guess what? Even if they do judge you, you should not be embarrassed. You're saving future generations. People ahead of you, they will be thanking you for the work you are doing today. So I try to change their mindsets, try to make them more passionate about these issues, and try to take away the embarrassment factor. Because if you really think about it, it's for the greater good. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for a question from the audience? I have one from Dan Baina that came in. All right, so one came in from our fellow member on the board, Dan Baina, fellow New Rochelle resident as well. So Dan mentioned, he's learning a great deal about the magnitude of interconnectedness of problems. What are some solutions from your perspective? Any? Yes. So from the great panelists, he's learning a lot, from a great deal about the magnitude of interconnectedness of problems. What are some solutions to help bring together our interconnectedness?
I think maggots are another one of the insects that like they have a really bad reputation, but they're not actually so bad. Like there's a lot of different species of maggots too. Like some of them are good, some of them are bad. So it's like so exactly. Oh, okay. Okay, got it. So like okay. To get people together, I think also like a lot of events they don't inspire people. So I think try to get things that like maybe like instead of just having like maybe try to make it more interactive. Like I think interactive events are always the best way, especially for insects. Like I think maybe like examples of the insects, like bring them together. Like I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
Okay. So basically, the question is, um, what are some solutions to bring to better connect our communities, to better connect young people with adults, so that we could bring some solutions together? Um,
Misunderstood. Well, so I think your answer was, I think, perfect though. I mean, I think beauty, right? Like music, art, like the things that like fascinate people and like piques people's interest, bringing that kind of fun things into the more dreadful things, like these issues that we're talking about, having that balance, I think is a great way to keep people inspired and not feeling like they're overwhelmed with like every catastrophe that is constantly, hitting our community. But I was also, and maybe someone else can better answer the question because I may have misunderstood it, but I do want to coming from someone who's run electoral campaigns and does a lot of cold calling, cold talking, knock on a lot of doors, talking to strangers, building a lot of common ground with someone I've never met before. And it's really just having those conversations and like relating with the people, knowing like, hey, I have a family, you have a family, like we want to keep our family safe, right? We want to make sure our kids get a good education, they have a good quality of life, they have all the opportunities that at their disposal, they have green space, they're able to experience this incredible environment around us, right? We want to protect that. And when you're able to build that common ground and understand that we're on the same side, then you can have a conversation about the issues that we need to kind of, collectively come around and really make a difference in. But it's really kind of finding that way in which you can build that common ground, because often there's so much polarization in our politics, and so it's so important to just kind of bring it back to that human aspect that we can all relate to, and understand that we want the best for each other and for all of us. And when we bring it to that, I think that we can all kind of move together in the direction that we want to.
Does anyone else want to provide a? Oh, okay. We'll take. Yes.
As I said previously, I do believe that there is a gap between the leaders of our community and the youth. And I feel like one way that they can resolve this issue is by going to the youth, because the youth have different organizations. They have groups where they're gathering around and talking about the issues within their community. I feel like they should find speakers from these organizations and bring them in and hear what they have to say. Like, I feel like they just need to listen to us more. Like, there are kids out here who do care, as you can see on the panelists, who care about our environment. And I just feel like if you just have a conversation with them, you'd realize that we have ideas that can, bring forward change within our community. So I just feel like just literally sitting down and having a very human one-on-one conversation, it could really change the perspective of how everything is happening.
All right. So we'll open the floor. I guess yes. Oh, yes. All right. We'll bring it over.
Okay, hello? Yes? Great. All right. So I was wondering, do you have any public media collaboration right now, like Channel 12, for example? Do you have any sort of a little spot with them at all? That would be a point I wanted to make. That's a start. A very simple term: you don't know what you don't know. So if you haven't experienced it, how someone hasn't showed it to you, haven't seen it, you never heard that word, you won't know that. And I personally come from a different generation, right? And there were only so many things that I was exposed to. And I, as a parent, then had hope, but I realized for my children to expose them to many more things than I even had. There's something regarding the insects. Do you know that the Lasden Park, do you know about its butterfly exhibit right now? The Lasden Park and Arboretum has an amazing butterfly exhibit, all about the caterpillar and what all it's doing. And it's something that could be encouraged. And even 7th, 8th graders, I think high schoolers, adults, should go through that. I was so impressed back when by a IMAX program on butterflies. And I never knew the way they began eating milkweed. They come from Canada, I believe, and do this migration, yes, to Mexico to eat milkweed. And as an adult, maybe 5 years ago, 60, 59, whatever, I first learned of that. So there are things. Okay, all right. And anyway, I'm very impressed by you all.
But I wanted to talk to this group here based on what Cynthia had to say. I think that people are very, very anxious to address the issue that you're concerned with, but they don't know how to do it. So I think that if you just provide simple information like, here's a letter that you can send to your counselor. Here's a letter that you can send with the context to your church. I'm a member of Kiwanis. Here's a letter that you can send to the president of International Kiwanis to help you spread the word and what it is that you want to do. People do want to help you, but they don't really they don't know where.
I'm sorry that we have such a short time, but let's see if any of the panelists want to respond to these questions.
So just very quickly, a very simple way that you can get involved and help with our initiative to end trash incineration in Westchester is that you can sign a petition. That petition will send an email on your behalf to the county executive and the board of legislators. We also have a public sign-on letter for organization, businesses, community leaders. We've had over 60 organizations, conservation advisory councils, sustainability commissions from all over the county sign on, as well as over a dozen elected officials. So if you think you can get your community leaders sign on to our letter, we'd love to have them. If we can build the public pressure and demonstrate that municipalities all over Westchester agree that we shouldn't be burning trash, we can make it stop here in Westchester, but we definitely need your help. Thank you.
And just to address one of the points earlier, one of the things that I did was part of a health study for PFAS that was in drinking water. So one of the things that we did was trying to connect with the community that we're working with. Whether the community that we were in, we were able to connect with people by going to barbershops, going into different cafes, being able to connect with them and show them that the environmental issue at hand is affecting everyone, and trying to inspire them and have a larger audience go to the elected officials to address the environmental issue.
To your point, I think a really simple way that to conserve insects in one way is actually to plant gardens. Like, I think gardens are one of the biggest ways to help save insects. So like on my website, there's actually this thing that like I worked with a bunch of different scientists, and there's a specific type of garden called the living greenway. So it consists of a rock garden and a flower garden, and these flowers, the specific flowers in the garden, are actually called as native flowers. And so a lot of people hear about the bumblebee, right? But did you ever know that before the bumblebee was here, there was actually things called American wild bees, and they still exist here. But because of these like invasive other species, they're actually like dying out. So these gardens help not only preserve the invasive insects, but also the ones that are native to America. And then to your point, I've actually been working with my school, so then next year there's going to be a few field trips specifically designed to going to like different like butterfly tours and like walking tours, so that people can really, and like there's like a lot of nature tours that are going next year, and there's going to be like rooftop gardens on the school. So these are just things, that simple things that can really help make a change.
All right, this will be our last question.
Um, I agree with like what you guys were saying about getting the youth community more involved, and I was kind of wondering in what ways I could get my high school like more involved. I'm not like class president or anything, so I don't really know what to do. And I would really like to know like how I could get more people involved, and maybe like the petitions, how I could like spread them in like the high school or something. One way you can do that is either you can go talk to the teachers, like if it's different class periods, you could talk to the teacher and ask if you could give like a small presentation to the class, and then ask the class, like the people in the classroom, if they would like to sign the petition, or like afterwards they can come talk to you about more information. But if you are very passionate about the topic that you're speaking, you can just, you know what I'm saying, present it. Because I've done presentations in the Boys and Girls Club to kids, and they'll come up to me and be like, oh my God, can I be a part of this? And then it's like you would take their emails, and then you would just send out like inform them weekly and things that are happening. And I've seen that with a lot of the organizations that I do take part in, like the FCWC network. They send you weekly emails, they have weekly meetings. So if you're really like trying to get your school more into environmental issues, you can even start a club. Like people will come out to clubs. And I think that a lot of kids, I feel like in this generation, we're so technology involved that we don't look back at times when high schools did have clubs. They had different clubs after school that did many different things, and I just feel like we just have to tap into those resources, because I'm pretty sure your school will be open to having the kids stay after school. Like that's not.
And just to kind of on in that same vein, like maybe use social media. Like the first step I think is creating a database. Like, because what you're talking about is organizing. Like this is what organizers do, right? Like you want to get a list of the people that you think care about your cause and their contact information, so that way you can follow up with them, invite them out to events to go to the park and have fun, just to be able to like build that camaraderie, that kind of like relationship amongst each other. before you actually get started with the work. And maybe it's starting like a Twitter group or a Facebook group, or like, I don't, TikTok, or I don't know if you can organize on TikTok, if there's groups you can create, but wherever the kids are hanging out, wherever your friends are hanging out, find ways to organize them, and you be kind of that organizer, pulling them together, reining them in, bringing them to meetings, telling them to come out to your council meetings, having them make comments, be that kind of like initiator, and then you'll see that if you build it, they will come. And then it'll, and that's when the magic really starts to happen.
Yeah, I fully agree with both of you. Like, you would be shocked how helpful your science teachers can be. Like, science teachers are your best friends for this kind of topic. And then, like, in addition to TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, YouTube is another big, big, big platform. So YouTube reaches over 4 billion people worldwide. And so just think about it. You can make one video, and then that could potentially reach up to 4 billion people. And then, like, as you start to gain like people, you can like start holding like events in person, and you can start recording those so that they can view it online and in person. And then that's how you can really like spread. And then you can like spread it with all your high school and then to your whole community.
Thank you very much to Paul and to our brilliant youth activists. You did a wonderful job, and I want to just remind us that Westchester County was at the forefront of the environmental movement back in the 70s and back in the 60s, actually, and the Hudson River and the Hudson Valley. We were at the forefront of the environmental movement with Pete Seeger and a lot of other key people. I am very sorry that we have to shut the panel down so soon, but I wanted to present some certificates. Raina has some certificates for the youth panel. Thank you all so much. You're really doing fantastic work. And I think if you can just open them and we can take a photo. I don't know if you could. Please, if somebody can take a photo, that would be great. Look at these wonderful young people. And if we include our keynote speaker, nobody's above the age of 33. There you go. Thank you all very, very much. You're wonderful. Now it is time for our business meeting. I'm sorry we had to rush so quickly with that youth panel because they gave us such a lot of very important information. But we do have to do our business meeting. It's our annual meeting. So I'm going to go quickly through the slides that give you a short version of what our committees are and who are their chairs. And then if you're interested at all, especially you young people, to join some of our committees, we would be absolutely delighted. And Ronnie Lickman is over there to take any new members, and we would be delighted if you would join us. Next slide. So these are some of our committees. The Advocacy Committee led by Yana Edwards, who's back there. Yana. And there are details on what each committee does, but you'll have to go to the website www.unawestchester.org to see all the details. Next. Communications Committee led by Raina Cadaval over there with the headphones on. She's working with the website and social media, but I tell you, she needs some assistance. She's working on her own, and we need some support on the Communications Committee. Next. Partnerships and Community Outreach Committee, that's Brenda Smith, Dr. Brenda Smith. She's not here today, unfortunately, but some of our most important partners are AKA and the Links Incorporated. They've been our partners at the national level for some time. The picture of the UN Water Conference is because I attended at the UN this year, and it was a really wonderful event. Next. Program committee. The program committee is the one that organizes these public outreach events 4 times a year. We usually do International Women's Day, our annual meeting, UN Day, and then Human Rights Day. And we invite you all to join us. Next. Education committee, Mr. M, where are you? There's Mr. M at the back. The Education Committee has a UNA Westchester media contest going. They've already completed the entries, and I believe they have winners, but we're not going to announce them today. We will do that at UN Day in the fall. Next, Membership Committee, Ronnie Lickman. She has been our super membership committee member. It's just interesting to see that 75% of our members are youth members. So that's quite interesting. And by the way, it's free for people under the age of 26. I think up to the age of 26. So please join if you're a youth member, and you can get a free membership. Next. Young Professionals Committee. You've seen Paul. Paul Presenju is a co-chair, and so is Reina Cadival. And they are superstars. They're doing so much. So please join them. Next. The budget summary. We have a small budget. You know, it was pretty stable over the 2022 year. Victor Patenkamani is our treasurer. Where are you, Victor? There he is, over in the corner. Our revenue and expenditures were pretty much in balance, but most of our revenue comes from membership fees. So we do hope you'll join us. Next. Okay, so now we come to the nominating committee. Our nominating committee is led by Brenda Smith, and they came together with a slate of new officers for this year, officers and directors. And then we voted electronically, and the following people were unanimously elected. Dimitrios Mihailides, Mr. M, First Vice President and Education Chair. Lily Schindler, and she is there. She still works for the UN. She's Second Vice President, and she will be in her position for 1 more year. Dan Bena, who is on Zoom with us, but he did so many graphics for me this year. I just appreciate him so much. He's a member of the Program and Communications Committees. Reina is Director of Communications and Young Professionals. And Ambassador Francis Okello is still here, there, Ambassador, and he will be a director, and he's on Program and Advocacy Committees. So let's give them all a hand. Our latest nomination for directors for the term 2023 to 2025. And thank you all the board members, for being such good support to me. Thank you all from our board. And before we leave, we have an important recognition. So we'll close that down for the time being. And I want to call on our super where are we? Oh, we want to recognize our super amazing Model UN team from Mercy College. They win every year. Their advisor is Michiko Kuroda, Professor Michiko Kuroda. She's been bringing in the Distinguished Delegation Award every single year. And this year they won 7 out of 8 position papers. I think our representative is here, Michiko. So shall we, Representative Bowman? Would you like to say, we're just about to recognize the Distinguished Delegation Model UN team from Mercy College. So could we recognize them and then ask you to say a few words? Okay, Michiko, well done again, and 7 out of 8 outstanding position papers. How about that? So Michiko,
Well, Honorable President Marshall, honorable sponsors, distinguished members of the association, and welcome guests. Thank you so much for having us again. We made it again. We made it better this year. I would like to introduce Aurora, who is our head delegate.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I was the head delegate of the Mercy College team this year. I started doing MUN when I was in high school in Norway. And I mentioned this to Professor Kuroda when I started Mercy College, and she right away welcomed me into the MUN team. I just want to say that I've learned an incredible amount doing this at Mercy College, learning from Professor Kuroda, but also from other people all over the world, which we get to meet at the conferences. I've learned public speaking, I've learned confidence, I've learned leadership, I've learned teamwork, amongst so many other things that I'm already noticing in my everyday life, in my other classes, and that I know that I'll be able to take with me. So being a part of the MUN team, just being a part of it, but also, of course, getting the recognition of the awards has been very rewarding for me, and I know that it'll continue to help me in my life. So thank you.
Thank you so much. James, did you want to say a couple of words?
Well, thank you. So I just wanted to echo the note that Aurora shared, but really focusing on that one moment that stood out for me was when we were in the General Assembly Hall and hear them mention a lot of other schools that really can't pronounce, but when they said Mercy College, Gabon, and we stood up and you saw the entire room with so many talented individuals, but then still have Mercy College recognized at such a high level, was really a surreal experience. And I have to say thank you to Professor Kuroda, and even being a part of Mercy College and knowing that it's in Westchester was such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Let's have a picture with the I'm just amazed that Professor Kuroda manages to get the top award every single year. And this is the National Model UN Conference, the National Model UN Conference that they're winning. Thank you very much. International. Thank you very much. Let's take pictures. I want to invite Representative Bowman up. Maybe you could be part of this picture too, Representative Bowman. And I just want to mention that Representative Bowman is a big supporter of the UN. And not only that, but he's been helping us with our campaign to implement the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women in Westchester County and at the national level. Representative Bowman, you want to say it?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here. Thank you so much for your leadership and your work in this area. I used to be in education, so sometimes I use props. And this is a very important prop right here. It's colorful, it's clear, and it gives us our blueprint for policy and activism going forward. The UN's sustainability goals. If we can align all of our public policy to these goals, we can achieve the mission of ending our dependency on fossil fuels, ending the fossil fuel industry as we know it, and at the same time saving the planet and saving humanity. And I don't say those words lightly, like we mean those words very seriously, because we see what's happening here, you know, with forest fires. We see what's happening here in parts of Texas and other areas with drought. There's drought in parts of the world that's led to hunger, that's led to mass migration, that has led to conflict. We see weather events that are destroying large parts of countries, and we see weather events here that have impacted here, Hurricane Ida just a couple of years ago. So the issue is serious, the issue is real, and the issue is urgent. We are living in a climate catastrophe, and we have to do everything we can, move heaven and earth, to save the planet from warming at an enormously rapid rate. It already is. We're already behind. We're actually decades behind. It was happening for decades. So now is the time for us to go big and to be very aggressive. And in me in Congress, you have someone that has prioritized this issue. Not just prioritize. I will do my best to continue to be a champion on this issue. It's one of the reasons why I chose to be on the Science, Space, and Tech Committee. Because on that committee, there's an energy subcommittee that focuses on investing in research and development in everything energy. And our conversations every day are about clean, green, renewable, sustainable energy, and how do we get there as quickly as possible. We just achieved fusion ignition in the United States. Did y'all know that? Anybody knew that? So fusion ignition, I'm going to mess up what it is because it's very complicated, but they shot lasers at a cylinder, and the cylinder produced energy that was more than the energy that was used to go into it. Does that make sense? And because it did that, if we can figure out how to harness that and replicate it, we can get to sustainable energy using fusion. This is mind-blowing stuff. This is like atom splitting stuff. This past week, I visited the Brookhaven National Laboratory way out in Long Island, and they're doing transformational work. They just need us to continue to invest in research and development. So you have me as an ally, as a co-conspirator, as a champion on this issue. I know we have Mary Jane Shimsky as an ally, as a co-conspirator, as a champion on this issue. And Mary Jane just had a major win at the state level with all the victories related to the Building Public Renewables Act. That was huge. So New York State is a leader in what's happening, but obviously we want to push them to go further and continue to lead for the entire country. So thank you for letting me say a few words. Look forward to working with you on this issue and every other issue related to justice and equity so that we can make the country the best that it's capable of being. So thank you all so much.
Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. I'm sorry we're in such a hurry, but we have to close at 4:30. So please have something to eat before you leave. I just wanted to thank everybody. This has been a fascinating event. Thank you to our keynote speaker, to our wonderful youth panel, to the Mercy College Model UN team, and to Representative Bowman and State Senator Shimsky, Congress Assemblywoman, Assemblyperson Mary Jane Shimsky. And I just wanted to thank AKA for being our partners again, and all the members of the committees and our board. Please, we only have 10 more minutes, so please help yourself to some food. Try to get a little bit of a conversation in, and hopefully next time we'll have more time. But thank you all for coming. It's been a fascinating event. Thank you very much.